Hello everyone, my name is Carly and today we are finally doing my 2025 reading journal setup. This year I am going miniature. I have decided to use a B6 notebook. Last year I used an A5, which I will show you here, so quite a bit bigger. The problem with the A5 was just the overall space on each page. Most times I didn't feel that I had enough thoughts or supplies even to fill a double page spread for every single book. The problem with that is that I would need to match up covers to artwork that would fit both books, and some spreads were easier than others, like this one with the dragon sticker sheet that matched these two book covers and themes. But a more difficult example would be this spread from the springtime, where I needed to find artwork to match this very bright pink peach cover to this light minty green. I was able to pull that off, I think, but at the cost of a lot of mental energy that I would just rather have spent doing the actual journaling process itself. So the main reason that I decided to go with the B6 this year is to have that option of doing a double page spread for each book, but of course I'm allowing myself the freedom to not do that if I would rather not. And if I have a ton to write about one book, I can always extend my spread with a Dutch door or a tip-in. So I think that this is going to be a really fun size. Also, sorry for the aggressive zoom here, but this is an Archer and Olive notebook that came in a subscription box in March 2023. I chose this one specifically because it's a little thicker than the majority of their other B6 notebooks. This one has 160 pages, whereas their normal B6, like this one, only has 112. I do like this really gorgeous compass pattern though. But you can see how much thinner this left one is compared to the right one, so that's why I decided to start with this one. But I also know that I will still likely fill this one up before the end of the year, or at least it's possible. So depending on how quickly that happens, I will choose which other B6 notebook to move into. So as you saw, I have this option from Archer and Olive with 112 pages. So if I fill up the green one pretty late in the year, I would go ahead and move into this one. But if for some reason I fill up the green one super quick, like by August maybe, then I might move into this Leela Journals B6 Rose spell book, which has 144 pages, so just a little bit more. But that's totally dependent on if and when I fill up the green notebook. With all of that information about all these notebooks out of the way though, let's go ahead and get into the first pages of my 2025 reading journal setup. First up, I just want to decorate the nameplate page, which I'll keep to relatively minimal decoration. So I used some craft paper letter stickers that I made to write out my name here, and then just some butterfly washi, and then some stickers that I've had in my stash for a while from Temu, and that will pretty much cover the nameplate page. I didn't want to go too crazy with this one. You can see that I'm skipping this first dot grid page that's always kind of stuck to that end paper, and that is because I'm going to turn that into a pocket, but I do end up waiting until the very end of this video to go back and make that pocket, but you'll see it at the end. In the meantime though, I am doing the main cover page. So the purpose of this is just to introduce this journal as my 2025 reading journal, because in future years, I may not be able to remember exactly which year certain journals are from and what their purpose was, so I want to be able to open it to the first page and see immediately that this was my reading journal for 2025. For this page, I am using some junk journal style washi tape from Archer and Olive and some grid paper that's from a scrapbook paper pack from Michaels, and that green paper on the bottom left is from Journal Say. But the main focal point for this page is this beautiful Marigona Suli art sticker. For some reason, I just love the vibe of this sticker, and I kind of wanted to match the vibe of the cover of this journal as much as possible in this setup, so I was really going for greens and botanicals and things like that, and also a little bit witchy if I could. So I know that she doesn't have a witch hat on or anything, but I don't know, I kind of feel like she grew those plants behind her with some magic, you know what I mean? And lastly, this is the first of many title stickers that you're gonna see that I made myself, and I will leave the fonts that I used to make those down below in case you want to make anything similar. And I used a sticker pack from Hobby Lobby that I actually was really hard to use. I don't know if I really recommend that sticker pack, but I'll leave it linked if you want. But for the title stickers that say reading and then journal, I just typed that out in my Silhouette program and then printed it on sticker paper and then cut it out with my Silhouette machine, which is just a sticker cutter. But you could also cut these by hand with scissors if you want. But I went ahead and went the extra mile this time because I wanted this setup to be a little bit easier, even though it still took me many days to do this. Okay, this next spread is going to get us into a lot of extra talking, so just bear with me. But this is going to get us into talking about some of the big changes that I'm making with my tracking this year, and most of it has to do with the way that I am breaking up my year. I have been watching a ton of videos from Jess over at Joshi Corin for probably the last few months. I've just been eating up her content. And one of the things that has spoken to me very directly, and I've been really inspired to do myself, is what she calls cyclic planning. This starts with breaking my year up into quarters, but then also breaking those quarters down into 4-week segments. She has great videos explaining all of that much better than I have time to do here, and I'll link those videos down below if you're interested. But basically, instead of looking at my year as made up of 12 months that are sort of arbitrary lengths of time, I'm looking at the year as made up of 12 4-week cycles and 4 extra weeks that are tacked on to the end of each quarter that she calls reset weeks. The big picture of how that affects my reading overall, I'm still unsure about, and I will adjust things as I go in terms of how I want to actually track my reading. But I do know that in my reset weeks, quote unquote, I really want to focus on rereading at least one book instead of trying to read something brand new like I usually do every time I pick up a book. I always wish that I did more rereading, but I'm never intentional about it because it always feels like not as valuable as reading something new to me. So that's the goal for the reset weeks. This spread specifically is just a reading log like I had in my 2024 journal, where I check off each day that I've read, but this time I've intentionally broken the tracker up into 4 boxes representing each quarter, and then each box is 7 dot grid spaces tall and 13 dot grid spaces wide, meaning I will start on the Monday of week 1 and check down the column, working my way over week by week, and then ending each quarter on a reset week. Hopefully that makes sense, but I know just speaking it out loud is probably unnecessarily confusing, so just let me know if you have questions in the comments and I will try to explain it if it's something that you're interested in. For the decoration on this spread, I just used some origami paper from an Amazon pack and a couple of stickers from that same Temu pack that I mentioned for my cover spread, and I used some of those title stickers that I made myself that I mentioned before. So again, I will link those fonts below, and also just a random mushroom washi tape from Hobby Lobby. Hopefully you can see better now that I've pinned in these column titles, which I didn't realize until just now how wonky those look, but whatever, it's fine. But hopefully you can see now kind of how I'm breaking it up. You can see that 1.1 should be cycle 1 week 1, and then 1.2 is cycle 1 week 2, and so on. And then at the very end of that quarter, I have R.1, which is reset week 1, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how I'm breaking it up. And then Monday through Sunday is how the column is going. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, if not, just put your question down below if you are really interested, and I can try to make it make more sense for you. The next spread here is my book tracker. So I have the same goal as last year, which is 84 books, and then I gave myself a bonus all the way up to 100, which, given my reading so far this year, I do not think that is going to happen, but we'll see. I'm just embracing all of my other hobbies as well, so reading has kind of slowed down a little bit for me, especially just in the past couple of months, but I think that's okay. I mean, reading is always going to be something that I enjoy, but I don't have to be doing it at a rapid pace for it to be valid. So anyway, for this page, I just made a bunch of squares that are 2 dot grid spaces by 2 dot grid spaces, and I placed them in such a way that shows that for 84 books, it would technically be 7 books a month or a cycle. Even if I'm not tracking by month, I can still kind of look at it that way. So you can see on the left side of the spread, I have 1 through 7 going from left to right on the top, and then 8 through 14 is the right side of that row. So it's kind of broken up by 7s, but not explicitly. But at least visually, I can see, okay, by the end of a certain cycle, am I at that multiple of 7 that I should be at if I wanted to reach 84 books? You know what I mean? But again, the way that I'm reading right now, it's probably not happening unless I, for some reason, started to pick up significantly. For the decoration with this one, I leaned much more into the witchy style with almost a dark academia edge to it, and most of the stuff on this spread is from Notebook Therapy. So I have a washi tape up top from Notebook Therapy, as well as some stamps and stickers. And the brown paper that I used for layering at the bottom is from Journal Say. And then I also used this vertical script washi, which is from Ikigai Papier, which is a shop run by Hedda over at Mochi Bujo, who I also get huge inspiration from. She's actually probably the main reason that I ever even started my reading journal, because I always wanted to start a reading journal, but I could not figure out the style that would fit what I wanted, because the only reading journals that I had really seen were so focused on stats and challenges that they just didn't really fit what I was looking for. And I couldn't figure out what I could do that would satisfy this desire to journal about my books, but not focus so heavily on goals and tracking and stats. Even though obviously at the beginning of this journal, you're seeing a lot of my tracking spreads, but I don't focus on tracking very significantly throughout the actual year itself. And I absolutely found inspiration for that style through watching Hedda's videos. So anyway, I finally got to place an order with her shop before the new year, and I am so happy with everything that I got. It also just feels extra special to use things from her shop, because her videos have just been a huge comfort for me since I started watching her when I was recovering from surgery last February. She was on repeat on my living room TV for like 5 weeks straight, to the point that my husband has watched every single one of her reading journal videos too. So she even inspired me to get a Neapolitan notebook to try for a reading journal in the future. So that may be coming up someday in my videos. I don't know, we'll see. But anyway, that gushing is over, and I guess I went backwards here. I wanted to add a grid to this tracker, but I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to do it. And then it came to me at one point to use this marker from Archer and Olive. I don't remember what these are called. They came in a subscription box, but it's a very light green, and I thought it might be a good style to go for in the middle. I didn't want to use the dark brown pen that I had been using, because I felt like it would just be a little bit too much to pin in all of these grids, if that makes sense. So I just used this light green kind of like marker pen thing from Archer and Olive. So moving on, I am starting in on a spread that I didn't make for my 2024 journal, but that I kind of wanted to include in 2025, and that is sort of a monthly tracker kind of thing, although it's actually still in the cyclic planning style. So I have 3 cycles on this page with 4 weeks in them each, and then at the bottom is the reset week. So these are kind of little calendars where I'll use either a Tombow or a highlighter or something to mark through each day that I was reading a certain book, and then I can get an idea of how long I was reading each book that I read, basically. I think this one is pretty straightforward, so I only recorded myself creating this one, but off camera I created 3 more of these so that I could cover the whole year. For the decoration, I pretty much just used this gridded washi tape from Amazon in a medium tan color, and then I added a dark brown color layered on top of that. And I cut the individual letters out of the title stickers that I created, because I felt like the entire word created too much white space on top of the washi, so I wanted to break that up a little bit. But I also kind of didn't love this font in the end. I really liked it at first because it reminded me a little of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but now that I cut out the individual letters, it's kind of giving more Harry Potter chapter titles, which is not exactly what I was going for, but it's fine. It is what it is, and I don't think it looks too bad. I'm just adding a few sparkles and stars here with my brown micron pen just to add a little bit of whimsy, and throwing down some washi tape for layering. And then I'm gonna use this notebook therapy stamp with like a little, I don't know, like a little girl in front of like a magical book. I don't know. I'm stamping that on some craft paper and gluing it down to the bottom. I'm just kind of trying to cover up some of this white space, not cover it, but like fill it up, I suppose. And then I threw on some more notebook therapy stamps for more decoration. So you can see me flip through those other spreads that I penciled in, but like I said, I'm gonna pin those in off camera and you'll see them in the flip through. So this is a spread that did you see my grocery list right there? This is a spread that I really, really love. I actually set up a spread like this in my 2024 journal, I think after I posted the video for that setup. So I don't know if this spread has ever actually shown up on my channel before, but I have used it for the entirety of 2024 and I really, really loved it. So I'm gonna be using it again in 2025. This is a 2-part spread, the first part being the left side here, which I'm calling my monthly count, and then the right side I'm calling my TBR Flux. The left side is pretty much what it sounds like. I'm just going to be filling out in a bar graph style the number of books that I read per cycle or month. And then the right side, the TBR Flux, is essentially me showing the change in the number of books on my physical shelf over time. So I will subtract the books from my TBR as I've either read them, DNF'd them, or donated them. And then I will add books as I've purchased and brought them into my home if I haven't read them before. The ones that I've purchased after reading them, like from the library or something, those don't count towards the Flux. I should say that this is specifically focused on the books on my shelf that I have not read, so my physical shelf, meaning my physical TBR. And then at the end of the year, I write the totals at the bottom of the Flux, so I can see how many books I took off of my shelves versus how many books I added. And the goal, of course, is to subtract more than what I add over time. The only difference between my TBR Flux for this year versus last year is that I am distinguishing between my read books and my DNF/donated books. Last year, I didn't really care about the difference between the two because I had so many books that I really just wanted to get off my shelves regardless of whether or not I read them, so I wasn't really concerned with the difference between the two. But this year, I have really pared down my collection and am sort of interested now in the number of books that I've read versus DNF'd versus donated, if that makes sense. I am still combining DNF and donate though, because to me that's kind of the same thing, because if I've DNF'd a book, I'm probably going to donate it. And if I donated a book, it doesn't really matter to me if I started reading it or if I just decided it wasn't interesting to me. So the main decoration on the spread comes from Marigona Art. The washi tape is her Dark Academia washi tape, which I really love, but I don't get to use very often because the background color is actually kind of pink toned and it never really ends up matching a lot of my stuff. But I absolutely love this washi tape so much, so I was really excited to get to use it here. Then I also utilized the girl with the dragon and a bag of bread, which I just felt like fit the vibe for me in this spread, and a couple of smaller stickers from the Dark Academia sheet. I also used this stamp that looks like a big window, which is from Notebook Therapy. So that's pretty much it. I did use some craft paper, which just comes from like an art sketchbook, basically. All right, flipping on through to the next one. This is another spread that I have not done before, but another way to track my DNFs, which is why I felt like in my TBR Flux spread, I didn't really need to make that distinction between DNFs versus donated, because I am including this spread in my journal, which is going to be my DNF Graveyard. So this is going to be a very Halloween spooky themed spread, which I don't know, I thought would be fun, and I have a lot of Halloween stickers that I really want to use, so that's where I got that from. And this spread is pretty self-explanatory, I think. It's just where I'm going to write down any books that I decided to DNF this year. That's it, pretty much. I am going to include probably the date that I decided to DNF it. I don't know why, but I guess it's interesting to me to see that type of data. This is another spread where I'm utilizing a lot of Marigona Art stickers and washi tape. This is her Halloween books washi tape, which again, I also don't get to use very often, but I am so pumped to get to use this for the spread. I'm always kind of bound by trying to match my book covers because in my regular journal spreads where I journal about each book that I read, I use a sticker that has a picture of the book cover on it. But the caveat to that is that I have to find stickers and washi tape and ephemera that match that book cover. So I never really get to just use what I want willy-nilly. I can use what I want to match, but I don't ever get to just grab something and base everything else off of that. It's always based off of the book cover. So I felt quite free in this setup to include a lot of things that I can base the spread around instead of having to focus on a book cover. So that's what I went with here. I knew I wanted a Halloween theme, and so I started with the Halloween books washi tape. I also included this orange plaid washi tape from Ikigai Papier and this black grid washi tape from an Amazon pack. And the black paper is an origami paper from Muji. Lastly, I pulled in this skeleton gravestone piece of art from Marigona Art again, and this is on clear sticker paper, which I love the effect of, so I'm really happy that I got to pull this one in as well and kind of fit the vibe. But I do think that this is kind of where I hit my limit with like gravestone imagery on this spread, because originally I was planning to draw out little gravestones and write the book names or the book titles on those gravestones along with the dates that I decided to DNF them. But I started to think that with the gravestone font that I used, and this is a font, which is crazy. I'll link it below, like I said, but I just think it's so funny that this is an actual font that I found. But with the gravestone font and then the gravestone art piece, I decided maybe not to draw in a bunch of gravestones. So I think I'm going to go with these squares, but I penciled them in the meantime, just in case, because I'm not 100% sure. So once I get to my first DNF, I'll make that final decision, but I think I'm going to go with the squares. Next up is a really simple spread that I definitely had in my 2024 journal, but this is just a spread that I'm calling My Library, and it is literally just me listing out the titles of all of the books on my physical shelf that I have not read. This just helps me get an idea of how much of my physical TBR am I crossing off, because I will go to this spread every time I finish a book on my TBR and put a straight line through the title of that book. And if I'm only crossing off like 1 or 2 books out of the month, then I know that I probably need to be increasing the reading that I'm doing from my TBR and stop getting so many either new books or library books or Kindle or whatever. So to make this spread, I decided to use some paint for the first time in my reading journal. I have this metallic iridescent gold watercolor that I really love, but I don't get to use it very often because I don't use watercolor very often in general, but I decided to create the border of this spread using this gold watercolor paint. In my last journal, I created a border similar to this, but I just used a Tombow to do so, and I felt like I wanted to jazz it up just a little bit, and I thought I could try to match the gold foil on the cover of this journal. So I also want to say that it may look patchy or dry as I'm putting it down on this page, but I want to make sure that I mention I am trying to use as little water as possible just so that I don't buckle my pages too much. So if you actually use the watercolor as it's intended, it's probably a lot better. And then I just used some craft paper where I stamped the words My Library and cut those out in these like oblong rounded rectangles, and I used those as the title. I created 2 like double page spreads for this so that I have plenty of room to write out all the books that I have on my shelf. Also, I do list my books out alphabetically, but as I purchase books and add them to my shelf, I go ahead and add them to the bottom of the list. So by the end of the year, it doesn't end up being fully alphabetical, but I kind of have a good mental list of what books that I've bought in a year. So I'm able to kind of remember that this book is probably at the bottom of the list and not in its placement alphabetically, if that makes sense. And for decoration on this spread, I used some stickers from Margot Nasuli Art again, and then I also pulled in these books and like book stacks from Layla Journals. We are flipping over now to my series tracker, where I am just going to be tracking the number of books that I've read in any series that I'm in the middle of, basically. I had this spread in last year's journal, but I went a little bit overboard, in my opinion, on the number of series that I was tracking, and I included a lot of series that I was interested in starting, but then I ended up not starting them that year, and so my series tracker felt a little bit empty or maybe unbalanced, I guess, or just overcrowded. So this time I'm only including series that I have already started and that I also have an interest in continuing. But I also left a blank part on the right side where I can fill in any series that I start this year and I'm interested in continuing, if that makes sense. For decoration, I'm pulling in a lot of these washi tapes that have a green botanical vibe to them and more title stickers that I created in my silhouette program. The first series I included is the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett, and the 3rd book is coming out this year, so I definitely want to include that series. I'm caught up aside from obviously the one coming out this year. The Regency Fairy Tale series, which starts with Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater, I still have the 2nd and 3rd books to go in that series, and then I think there's a couple of novellas as well. The Dream Harbor series by Laurie Gilmore, that is starting with The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and then I have read the Cinnamon Bun bookstore as well, but I haven't read any more in that series and I would like to. And the Glimmer Falls series, which starts with A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, which I really enjoyed last year, which is by Sarah Hawley. I have not read any more in that series. The Rebel Blue Ranch series starts with Done and Dusted by Lila Sage, and I think I've read the second one as well, Swift and Saddled. And then the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Raybourn, I've read the first book in. The Shady Hollow series, I've read like 4 out of the 5 books, I think. And then the Wayward Children series by Shannon McGuire, I've also only read the first book. Those are all the series that made it to my series tracker, but like I said, I left that right-hand side open for adding more. And then at the bottom of that right-hand side, I also included a reread wish list so that I can make a list of books that I would like to reread, and I can reference that during my reset weeks so that I can make sure to prioritize books that I definitely want to reread. Moving on here, we are going to get into my author backlog spread. This is just me writing down a list of books that are part of an author's backlist that I am really interested in. So an example is T. Kingfisher. I'm really interested in her backlog of books. I've only read one novella that she came out with in 2023, and I loved it, and I heard really great things about her books, but there's like 13 of them so far. So I just want to have a list of those books to reference when I'm looking for something to read, which is almost never because I have so many books already, but it's still worth it to have a nice list here to give me some inspiration, I suppose. Other examples of author backlogs that I'm interested in are Ava Reed, Rebecca Ross, Leigh Bardugo, TJ Klune, and Josie Silver. Those are the ones that I believe I'm going to be including on this spread, but I could always add more. I think, if I have the number right. Yeah, that gives me 2 empty boxes to work with if I want to add anybody else. I just used this wallpaper patterned paper from a Temu pack to put across the top there, and then I again made my own titles, so I made it say author backlist. Oh, I also included these insect stickers from a Michaels pack. I know it might be a little bit creepy crawly, but I actually think it looked really cool, so yeah, I was happy with that inclusion, but I know it can be a little bit icky to some people. I actually really don't like bugs, but I like the way that these stickers look. And next up, we have my new releases spread. So this is just going to be a place where I write down all of the new releases that I'm interested in 2025. And I'm going to split them up by month so that each new month that comes by, I can open up to that page and see what's coming out and see if I'm interested in either purchasing it or getting it from the library or something like that. Or I don't know, anticipating and getting excited for new releases is always a fun time. I used this green botanical origami paper from an Amazon pack to decorate the top and bottom of the spread, and overall I kind of went for a mushroom cottage butterfly garden kind of vibe for this one. So you'll see me pull in some Mushy Works stickers and these washi tapes along with that origami paper I mentioned, just to kind of bring in a mushroom vibe overall. You can see that I drew some boxes bigger than others for certain months, and that is because there are some months that just have like 2 or 3 releases that I'm interested in, and then there are some months that have like 4 or 5 and might get more added later because, you know, of course, towards the middle of the year, there might be more releases announced for the end of the year. So I kind of made January through May a little bit smaller because I'm pretty sure of the releases that are coming out in that time, and then they kind of got bigger as they went, and then December just had to be small because of the decoration. So, and I just use this really pale Tombow dual brush pen to do like the side highlight, and you can read some of my anticipated releases here as I write them down. I think my handwriting got really terrible in this one, which my handwriting isn't ever really that good, but it was particularly bad here, I think. Next, we have a spread that I'm calling my library history spread, which is a modification of one that I did last year that I didn't really end up using that much, and that was my library wish list. That spread was intended to write down books that I was interested in checking out from the library, so that whenever I go in the library and want to pick something up, but I can't remember what I was interested in or what I should be looking for, I can take a look at that list and get some ideas, basically. But what ended up happening is that I never had my journal with me physically when I was at the library, so I would end up using my Goodreads anyway. And when I actually used my journal, I wasn't really interested in going back and looking at my library wish list. So it just didn't end up being a useful spread. But this one is a modification of that spread. So I still would like to keep track of the books that I'm checking out from the library so that I can look back and see which ones I ended up reading, which ones I ended up putting back without reading them, basically. And with that, I can actually still use this spread to function in the way that the previous one was meant to, because I can go back and look at books that when I was in the library 3 months ago, I found this book and I found it interesting and I checked it out, but I didn't read it. So I should go check it out again and actually read it this time, if that makes sense. So I could still use it for the functionality that I intended last year's spread to have, but I think it's still, instead of just me writing down a wish list of books that I want to check out from the library, this is going to track just the books that I already have checked out from the library. So it'll also kind of free me up to just pick up whatever looks interesting without having the mental constraints of a physical list that I've made in the past. For decoration on this one, I'm really going with a hodgepodge of things and not really thinking too seriously about the decoration on this one, because I probably am not going to use this spread like super intensely, but I used a washi tape from Archer and Olive and then just a bunch of stickers from different Temu packs. And I'll link everything down below that I've used. That way, if you are interested, you can find it. But I don't think any of this decoration is particularly interesting, probably. So, but yeah, I wasn't worried about this spread too much. So I just kind of put together a couple of things that felt like they had a nature vibe to them. And finally, this is my last major spread for my 2025 reading journal setup. I do go back to the beginning of the notebook to set up that pocket that I mentioned earlier, but really this is like the big kahuna of spreads for this setup. This is my book purchasing tracker, basically. And this was one of, if not the most important spread to me in last year's setup. I would say that my purchase tracker, my personal physical TBR tracker, the one that says my library, the monthly count / TBR Flux combo spread, and then my number of books read grid tracker thing. Those are my main spreads that I go back to at least once a month, if not more. But I would say that this one is sort of my most aesthetic of all of those spreads, I suppose, because I draw a bookshelf in this one. This type of spread is really common for people to track their reading specifically, but I always felt like that was too redundant for my specific journal because I really like the grid style, the square tracker. And I also have a tracker where I, cross off all the books that I've read on my physical TBR. And just to have one more spread where I'm just tracking the books that I've read, I just feel like is overkill. But I've always wanted a bookshelf tracker like this in my journal. And so I made sure to have one last year and I used it for tracking my purchases and I really loved it. So that's why we're going with it again, basically. I knew the main challenge for this specific setup this year was going to be space. Last year, I ran out of room on my purchase tracker, and I knew that in this year's setup, I wanted to give myself more space so that I don't run out of room on my bookshelf. But I also went down in notebook size. So not only was the spread not big enough in an A5 notebook, but now I'm moving down to a B6. So my solution was basically to create these Dutch doors. So I cut off the top and bottom strip of paper, and I think it's about 5 or 6 dot grid spaces or so off the top and the bottom. And I did that for 2 pages out of the notebook, which gives me a total of 3 bookshelves if you include the pages that I didn't cut. The layout for this spread is basically a bookshelf with 20 books on the left side and then a table on the right with 20 rows. So the idea is basically to make sure that they correspond between the table on the right and the bookshelf on the left. I didn't want to split up book titles across different bookshelves and different tables. I wanted them to correspond with each other, basically. On the spines of the books, I will write the titles of books that I purchased this year, along with a little symbol that denotes whether it was purchased new or used. I will also eventually color the book in with a color that corresponds to whether I've read it previously, in which case I would color it right away after purchasing it, whether I ended up reading it this year, so I'll color it in after finishing, whether I've DNF'd it, or whether I plan to read it in a future year, which basically just allows me to not have any uncolored books by the end of the year. I want to have like a nice full bookshelf. The table on the right is where I will write the same title of a book, but include the store and or city that I bought it in, because I love buying books when I travel and I want to know where I bought what, and also the date that I bought it. I just think that that's fun. I know 20 books per page equaling 60 books sounds like a lot, but I brought in 45 books last year and I was actively trying to buy 0. So if I'm not trying to buy 0 books this year, it's possible that I'll end up buying even more than 45. So I'm just giving myself room to track that. It's also possible that I'll buy less, you know, who knows? For decoration for this spread, I went for a coffee shop vibe. I knew that this year I really wanted to include a mocha style spread because of the Pantone color of the year being like mocha mousse or whatever. I think that's the name of it. I was just really inspired by that and I wanted to pull in like a mocha mousse themed spread. And so I just went full coffee themed on this one and included some brown paper from Journal Say and then these pet tape stickers. They weren't kiss cut, so I had to cut them out myself, but they were like pet tape strips from Temu, I believe. And that is basically the entire spread. I just used that brown paper, layered the pet tape on top. I added my key at the bottom, which I just made out of one of those cutoffs. Also, the pen that I've been using in this setup is a brown Pigma Micron plastic nib. So this is not a black pen. I've been using brown pretty much the entire time except for the Graveyard spread. That one will be black. And then I'm just going to use this dark brown Tombow dual brush pen to create the bookshelves on the bottom. And the third page, I ended up deciding not to pin in because I thought maybe by the time I got to that part of my tracking that I might have a better idea of how many books to include on that shelf, because I'm just not sure if I'm going to need 60 books or less, or if, I mean, God forbid, I need more than that. So I just decided not to pin in the third page yet. I'll wait until it's later in the year and I have a better idea. I also use this light tan Tombow to add like every other highlight, if that makes sense, just to kind of make it more pleasing to the eye to look at that table. And now we are finally flipping back to the very first page in the notebook, which I am going to turn into a little pocket. For what purpose, I'm not sure, but I keep hearing people talk about doing that and it sounded fun, so I wanted to try it with this one. So I am just cutting off this top bit here, and then I am going to add some washi tape there at the sort of opening of the pocket. And I decided to create like a double pocket, I think. And so I grabbed this dark brown paper from Journal Say, and I'm going to add it using some double-sided tape and washi tape as well to kind of create this two-tiered pocket situation. I'm adding some craft paper to the background of the top, or the bigger pocket, I suppose, because I just thought it kind of gave it a better look. I should mention the washi tape is from Simply Gilded, but it is no longer available. It's like my favorite washi tape of all time, so I'm bummed that it's not available anymore, but you know, I have it and I have to use it. But it has these little mushrooms on it and I think it's super cute. There you saw me use the double-sided tape on two sides of the pocket, so the left side and then the bottom side, and I cut up the brown paper and added the washi tape to the top of that as well, and then a little butterfly, well, a giant butterfly sticker I added to that bottom pocket. And that's just from that same Michaels pack that I used earlier. And we have finally made it. That is my completed 2025 reading journal setup. I am so thankful that you stuck around all the way until the end here and you get this little flip through to kind of peruse all of the spreads that we've put together today. I am so happy with the styling of this setup and also just the perfect little size of this journal. I cannot wait to get into it and actually start using it. Also, you might have seen that I skipped one page. I did that in my journal last year as well. I just leave it for me to put in a bunch of book covers of all of my favorite books of that year. So I'm just leaving that to the end of the year basically. But hopefully you enjoy this little flip through. Thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos from me, I do monthly reading journal check-ins basically, where I will talk about all of the books that I read that month and I will journal about all of them in a very similar scrapbooky collage style that I've done in this setup, and hopefully you will want to see those. And if you do, you can subscribe and you can click a notification bell. You can get notified every time I upload, because I do not have a schedule. I do have a full-time job, so I don't schedule my uploads or anything. I just do them as possible, and it would be great to have you stick around. So I will see you all in my next video. Whoever knows what that's going to be, I don't, but I will see you then.